My name is Eleanor, and I'm 32 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been chasing a ghost, the ghost of my father's approval. Always just out of reach, no matter how fast I ran or how hard I tried. My father, William Chen, built Chen and Associates from absolutely nothing. He started in a tiny office above a dry cleaner with one desk, one phone, and a dream bigger than himself. That small accounting firm grew into a multi-million-dollar financial consulting company, and I watched it happen. I watched him sacrifice everything: weekends, holidays, family dinners, to build something that would last. And somewhere in my child's heart, I decided that if I couldn't have his time, I would earn his respect. I would make him so proud that he'd have no choice but to see me. But there was always Marcus. My brother, 3 years older than me, with Dad's smile and an effortless charm that made people lean in when he talked. Marcus was athletic, popular, the kind of kid who made everything look easy. He played varsity basketball. He had a million friends. And Dad's eyes would light up like the 4th of July whenever Marcus walked into a room. I was the quiet one, the bookish one, always sitting in the corner with my nose in a textbook, trying to solve equations that would somehow add up to love. I started working at the company when I was 15 years old. Every summer, while my friends were at the beach or the mall, I was filing documents in the basement office, learning the systems, watching how Dad talked to clients. I studied finance in college because I thought if I understood his world, maybe he'd finally let me into his heart. Marcus went to art school in California, barely called home except when he needed money, and showed up to family dinners maybe twice a year. But when he did show up, it was like the sun came out. Dad would cancel meetings just to have lunch with him. He'd ask Marcus about his painting, about his life, about his dreams, with an interest he never showed in mine. I joined Chen & Associates full-time when I was 23, and I poured everything I had into that company. I modernized our entire client management system because the old one was falling apart. I brought in 3 major corporate accounts by working nights and weekends, building relationships, proving we were worth their trust. Within 5 years, I'd increased our revenue by 40%. 40%. I'd walk into Dad's office with the quarterly reports, my hands shaking with pride. And he'd glance at the numbers, nod once, and say, "Good work, Eleanor." 2 words. Then he'd look past me, out the window, and ask if Mom had heard from Marcus lately. It felt like dying a little bit every single day. Like I was screaming at the top of my lungs in a soundproof room and no one could hear me. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that hard work was its own reward, that building something real was enough. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I'd wonder what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I enough? What did Marcus have that I didn't? And the worst part was, I couldn't even hate him for it. He was my brother. This was just how things were when Dad got diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. The doctor's words felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. 6 months to a year, they said. Maybe longer with treatment, maybe less. I remember walking out of that hospital room and sitting in my car in the parking lot for 2 hours, unable to turn the key, unable to drive away, because leaving felt like accepting it was real. I became his shadow after that. Every chemotherapy appointment, I was there, holding a bag of ginger candies because they helped with the nausea. Every bad night when the pain medication wasn't enough, I'd sit beside his bed and read him reports from the office because work was the only thing that seemed to calm his mind. I watched my father, this strong, immovable man who'd built an empire with his bare hands, become fragile and small. His hair fell out. His hands shook. But his eyes, those sharp, analytical eyes, they stayed the same. I ran the company while he was sick. I made every decision, attended every meeting, put out every fire. Our competitors circled like sharks, thinking we'd fall apart. I made sure we didn't. I worked 18-hour days and smiled through the exhaustion because I needed him to know that everything he'd built was safe with me, that I could carry this weight, that I was strong enough. Marcus sent flowers. Beautiful, expensive arrangements that arrived every few weeks with cards that said things like, "Thinking of you, Dad, and stay strong." Dad kept every single card in a box beside his bed. Sometimes I'd catch him reading them and there'd be this soft smile on his face, this tenderness I'd never seen directed at me. It made me want to scream. It made me want to shake him and ask why a card meant more than my presence, why distance was more valuable than devotion. But I never did. I just held his hand and pretended my heart wasn't breaking. He died on a Tuesday, morning in March. The sunrise was beautiful that day, painted in colors of orange and pink, which felt cruel somehow. I was alone with him when it happened. I'd sent the nurse to get coffee, and it was just the two of us in that quiet hospital room. His breathing had been labored for hours, each breath a struggle, and then suddenly he opened his eyes. Really opened them, clear and focused in a way they hadn't been for days. He looked right at me, and I thought, this is it. This is the moment. He's finally going to say something. He's going to tell me he saw me, that he knew what I'd sacrificed, that I mattered. He squeezed my hand. So weak, barely any pressure at all. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I leaned closer, my ear nearly touching his mouth, desperate for whatever he wanted to say. But there was only a breath, soft as a whisper, and then nothing. His hand went limp in mine, and just like that, William Chen was gone. Taking whatever words he'd meant to say with him into the silence. I sat there holding his hand for a long time after, wondering if I'd imagined that final look, or if maybe, just maybe, it had meant something after all. Marcus arrived 2 hours after Dad died, wearing designer sunglasses and rolling a carry-on suitcase like he'd just come from vacation. He hugged Mom and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing in a way she hadn't when I'd called to tell her Dad was gone. I stood there watching them, invisible again, even in grief. The funeral became my responsibility by default. Marcus said he was too devastated to handle the details, so I picked the casket, wrote the obituary, chose the flowers that would surround our father's body. I gave the eulogy because Marcus claimed he couldn't find the words, and I spoke about Dad's integrity, his vision, his unshakable dedication to excellence. While my brother sat in the front row, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, the worst part was how good he looked doing it. How perfectly he played the grieving son. People squeezed his shoulder and told him how sorry they were, and he accepted their sympathy like he'd earned it, like he'd been there, like he'd watched our father waste away, seen the fear in his eyes when the pain got too bad, held his hand through the long, dark nights when death felt close enough to touch. 2 weeks later, we gathered in Martin Reeves' office for the will reading. The building was downtown, all glass and steel and expensive silence. Martin's office was on the 14th floor, with floor 2 ceiling windows that looked out over the city Dad had conquered. Mom sat between Marcus and me on a leather sofa that probably cost more than my first car. Her hands trembled as she twisted a tissue into knots. She'd lost weight since the funeral, her wedding ring loose on her finger. Martin had been Dad's lawyer for 20 years. I'd met him at company events, remembered him as kind, with silver hair and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Today, he wasn't smiling. He sat behind his enormous mahogany desk with a folder in front of him, and something in his expression made my stomach clench. "Thank you all for coming," he said softly. "I know this is difficult." William was very specific about how he wanted this handled. He opened the folder and began to read, and with every word I felt myself disappearing. "To my beloved son Marcus Chen, I leave my entire estate." The room tilted. I gripped the arm of the sofa, my fingernails digging into the leather. "This includes the family home at 847 Riverside Drive. It's the house where I'd grown up, where I'd scraped my knee learning to ride a bike in the driveway, where I'd studied at the kitchen table every night, dreaming of making Dad proud. All financial assets and investment portfolios, everything he'd built, every dollar he'd saved, and full ownership of Chen and Associates. It's the company, my company, the place where I'd spent 9 years of my life, where I knew every employee's name, every client's history, every corner of every office, gone, just like that. Given to someone who couldn't even tell you where we kept the financial records." Martin kept reading. "Dad's car collection. The vacation property in Lake Tahoe where I'd spent every summer as a child. His personal effects, his watches, his cufflinks, even his wedding ring. Marcus got everything. My name hadn't been mentioned once. Not once. I couldn't breathe. I stood up because sitting there felt impossible. My legs were shaking, my chest so tight I thought my ribs might crack. I needed air. I needed to get out of that office before I shattered into a million pieces right there on Martin's expensive carpet. Mom was crying softly, and Marcus was trying to look somber, but I could see it in his eyes, that flicker of satisfaction, of vindication, like he'd finally gotten what he deserved all along. Miss Eleanor? Martin's voice stopped me halfway to the door. There's one more thing. I turned slowly. He was holding an envelope, cream-colored and thick, with my name written across the front in Dad's precise handwriting. The same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards that always said love, Dad, but never anything more. The same handwriting that had signed my college diploma frame but had never written me a letter just to say he was proud. Your father left specific instructions, Martin continued, his voice careful, measured. This is to be given to you privately after the will was read. He also left a second sealed envelope. He held up another, this one marked with a red seal, to be opened only if you choose to act on what's in the first letter. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Wait, what is that? What else did Dad leave? If there's more to the will, we have a right to know. That's between your father and your sister, Martin said, and there was steel in his voice I'd never heard before. He looked at me, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. He handed me both envelopes and a business card with his personal cell phone number written on the back. When you're ready, Eleanor? Day or night. I'll be waiting. I took them with numb fingers and walked out. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look at my mother's confused face or Marcus's suspicious one. I just walked down the hallway, into the elevator, through the lobby, into the parking garage where my car sat, covered in a thin layer of city dust. I sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes, staring at that envelope like it might explode. I couldn't open it there. Not in that cold concrete garage, not in the shadow of that building. So I drove to Riverside Park, the place Dad used to take me when I was little. Back before Marcus was born, when it was just the two of us. We'd get ice cream from the truck mint chip for me, vanilla for him, sit on the bench overlooking the water. He'd tell me about his day, about the clients he'd met, the deals he'd closed. He made me feel like I mattered, like my questions were important, like I was someone worth spending time with. I hadn't been back to that bench in 15 years. It was still there. Weathered and scarred, but solid. I sat down and finally tore open the envelope with shaking hands. 3 pages fell into my lap, covered front and back in Dad's handwriting. My dearest Eleanor, it began, and I started to cry before I even read the next line, because he'd never called me that. Never once in 32 years had he called me dearest. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then everything has gone according to plan, though I imagine you're hurt and confused right now. Please forgive me for what you just endured. I need you to trust me one more time. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the pages. Trust him. He'd just given everything I'd worked for to Marcus. He'd erased me from his will like I'd never existed. How could he ask me to trust him now? From beyond the grave, when he'd never trusted me with the truth while he was alive. But I kept reading, and with every word the world I thought I knew crumbled and rebuilt itself into something else entirely. 18 months ago, our accountant, Patricia, came to me with concerns about discrepancies in the books. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $3,000 there. I told her I'd look into it personally. Dad had known. For 18 months, he'd known something was wrong. I hired a private investigator, Eleanor. Not because I wanted to, but because the evidence pointed somewhere I didn't want to look. It pointed to your brother. The next page detailed everything. Marcus had been stealing from the company for nearly 3 years. He'd created fake vendor accounts, forged Dad's signature on transfers, moved money through a series of shell companies into offshore accounts. Nearly $300,000 gone. Stolen by the golden child who couldn't be bothered to visit his dying father, but could apparently find time to embezzle from him. I have all the evidence, Dad wrote. Bank records, email trails, forged documents. Marcus was sloppy, arrogant. He thought I was too sick to notice, too weak to care. Maybe he was right about the first part. The cancer took so much from me, Eleanor. But it gave me clarity too. It showed me what actually matters. My tears were falling on the pages now, smudging the ink, but I couldn't stop reading. I've watched you build this company with your own hands. Every innovation, every client you brought in, every crisis you solved, I saw all of it. And I never told you. I told myself I was teaching you strength, independence, that my approval shouldn't matter. But that was a lie I told myself because I didn't know how to be the father you deserved. I was raised by a man who showed love through silence and distance, and I became him without meaning to. My greatest failure wasn't in business, Eleanor. It was in letting you believe you weren't enough. I pressed my hand to my mouth to hold back a sob. People walking past the bench probably thought I was having a breakdown. They weren't wrong. The Will Martin read today was fake, a performance. I needed Marcus to think he'd won, to accept everything without question. The real Will leaves Chen and Associates to you. The house, the majority of my estates, yours, Eleanor. It was always meant to be yours. But I'm giving you a choice. The letter explained the second envelope, the decision I had to make. Confront Marcus with the evidence, expose everything, and claim what was legally mine. Or let it go. Walk away, let Marcus keep his theft and his dignity. I've given you the sword, Dad wrote. Only you can decide if you'll use it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with Dad's letter spread out in front of me, reading it over and over until I had every word memorized. Martin had given me the evidence files, a thick manila folder full of bank statements, emails, documents that proved exactly what Marcus had done. Each page was another betrayal, another lie, another moment where my brother had stolen from the man who gave him everything. Part of me wanted to burn it all, to let Marcus have his victory, take my broken heart, and disappear somewhere he'd never find me. Start over in a new city with a new name, where no one knew I was the daughter who wasn't good enough. But every time I thought about walking away, I heard Dad's voice in my head from all those late nights at the office. Integrity isn't about doing what's easy, Eleanor. It's about doing what's right, even when it costs you everything. The company Dad built deserved better than to be dismantled by someone who saw it as nothing but a bank account. The employees who'd worked there for decades, who had families and mortgages and dreams, they deserved better. And maybe, just maybe, I deserved better too. I called Martin at 8 a.m. My voice was steady when I said, "Open the second envelope. I'm ready." 2 hours later, I had everything I needed. The real will had already been filed with the court. Chen and Associates was mine. The house was mine. 70% of Dad's estate was mine. Marcus had been left a trust fund enough to live comfortably if he wasn't an idiot with Munyand. One chance to make this right. I called a family meeting for that afternoon at the Riverside house. Mom arrived first, her eyes red and swollen from 2 weeks of crying. Marcus showed up 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses inside like some kind of movie star. He threw himself into Dad's leather chair in the study, the one I'd watched Dad sit in 1,000 times, and put his feet up on the desk. "What's this about, Eleanor?" he asked, scrolling through his phone. "I'm supposed to meet with a realtor tomorrow about listing this place. It's worth at least $2 million, maybe more if we—" I placed the folder on the desk in front of him. "Before you sell Dad's house, I thought you might want to see these." He opened it casually, like he was looking at a restaurant menu. Then his face went white. Actually white, like all the blood had drained straight out of his body. Page after page of evidence. His signatures, his fake companies, his theft laid bare in black and white. Dad knew. Marcus. My voice didn't shake. He knew everything. The money you stole, the accounts you created, the lies you told, all of it. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" "The will you heard last week." I continued. "It wasn't real. It was a test. Dad wanted to see if you'd question why he'd leave you everything when you'd done nothing to earn it. You failed.